The cold arrived early that year. It wasn't the kind of cold that merely stung the skin. It sank deep, finding its way into your bones and settling there, whispering of loneliness. I felt it most in the quiet hours before dawn, when the house creaked and the wind moaned across the fields, reminding me that another Thanksgiving had come without a single call from my son. Mark had always called. Even when he was in college, he'd send a text, asterisk, "Love you, Mom. Save me some pumpkin pie." Asterisk, after he married Vanessa, the calls became less frequent, first monthly, then only on birthdays. Now, even birthdays passed with silence. It had been 3 years since I'd been invited to their home. Each year there was a new excuse. "We're traveling this year, Mom. The kids are sick. Maybe next time." Each excuse was another tiny fracture in my heart, but I smiled through it, told myself he was busy, that life had simply changed. That's what mothers do. We forgive before anyone even apologizes. But this morning was different. I woke up to a hollow house, the ticking clock in the hallway louder than usual. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon from the pie I'd baked last night, out of habit more than hope. My husband's old armchair sat empty by the fireplace, his blanket folded neatly on the armrest, as though he might walk in any second and grumble about how cold it was outside. He'd been gone for 7 years now. The last thing he said to me was, asterisk, "Look after our boy, no matter what happens." Asterisk, I tried. God knows I tried. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a lukewarm cup of tea, staring at the phone on the counter. I could have called Mark again, begged him to let me visit, but something in me twisted at the thought. No more begging, not this year. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was love, maybe it was both. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and said aloud to the empty room, "If my son won't invite me, I'll just go to him." The pie went into a box, still warm. I put on my thick wool coat, the one my husband used to tease me about, and stepped out into the cold. The morning air bit at my cheeks. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, and snow dusted the ground like powdered sugar. Mark's new house was an hour and a half away in a newer part of town. Big, expensive homes with perfect lawns and neighbors who waved politely but never stopped to talk. I'd only been there once, years ago, before everything changed. As I drove, the radio played soft Christmas music, even though it was still November. The cheerful melody felt almost cruel. My mind wandered through the years, Mark's laughter as a boy, his first Thanksgiving turkey at age 12, overseasoned and burnt, but proudly eaten anyway. And then Liam, sweet, quiet Liam, my grandson. The last time I saw him, he'd been 4 years old, chasing autumn leaves in my backyard, his cheeks red with joy. I'd sent him gifts, birthday cards, little sweaters I knitted during long winter nights. They always came back unopened. Vanessa claimed he was too young to keep track of mail. Something about that had never sat right with me. The snow thickened as I reached the outskirts of town. My old car groaned in protest, but I pressed on, following the navigation voice until it led me to a cul-de-sac lined with pristine white fences and identical mailboxes. There it was, Mark's house, bigger than I remembered. The windows glowed warmly, golden light spilling into the frosted yard. Through the front window, I could see movement, shadows crossing, laughter, the faint clink of glasses. For a moment, I smiled. Maybe they had just forgotten to call. Maybe it really was an oversight. I parked at the curb, lifted the pie box, and stepped into the cold. That's when I saw him, a small figure huddled on the edge of the sidewalk, half hidden behind the mailbox. At first, I thought it might be a neighborhood child, but then he turned and my heart stopped. Liam, he blinked at me, his lips blue from the cold. His hair stuck to his forehead, damp with frost. He wore only a thin gray t-shirt and shorts his knees scratched, his little hands trembling. "Grandma," he whispered, as if unsure I was real. "Sweetheart," I gasped, rushing forward. What are you doing out here? Where's your coat? He just stared at me, eyes wide and glassy. I dropped to my knees, the snow soaking through my pants. I pulled him into my arms, his skin icy under my touch. You're freezing. Oh, honey, you're so cold. Why are you outside? He hesitated, glancing toward the glowing house. They told me to wait. Who told you to wait? Daddy and Miss Vanessa, he said softly, almost apologetically, as if he were the one at fault. They said I ruined dinner. The words hit me like a blow. Ruined dinner. He was 6. I looked toward the house again. Laughter spilled through the walls, muffled but unmistakable. I could almost see them at the table. Mark carving the turkey, Vanessa smiling that cold, perfect smile she always wore, her 2 children sitting neatly dressed beside her. Inside, it was warmth and comfort. Out here, my grandson was freezing to death. Come with me, I said firmly, lifting him. He was lighter than I remembered, too light, as if the cold had hollowed him out. Grandma, he whispered, his small hands clutching at my coat, they'll be mad. Let them be mad, I said, my voice trembling with fury I didn't recognize. They should be ashamed. I walked up the driveway, each step crunching through snow that glimmered under the porch light. My heart pounded in my chest, a steady drumbeat of disbelief and rage. I could hear them inside now, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversation. The world looked picture, perfect through the window, a family framed in golden light. I reached the door. My fingers tightened around the handle. For a moment I hesitated. I had spent years trying to stay out of Mark's life, giving him space, respecting his choices. But this was unforgivable. I didn't knock. I kicked the door open. The sound was loud enough to make the chandelier tremble. Inside, heads turned, conversations froze. The room went dead silent. Mark stood at the head of the table, knife in hand mid-carve. Vanessa's face went pale as the snow outside. Her 2 children gawked at me. Why? Died and speechless. Liam buried his face in my coat. I looked at them all, my chest rising and falling, fury and heartbreak twisting together until I could hardly breathe. And though my voice was shaking when I spoke, it was clear as ice. Asterisk, asterisk. Why is my grandson outside freezing? Asterisk, asterisk. The silence that followed was heavy, thick, suffocating, absolute. It was as if every clock in the world had stopped ticking just to hear those 6 words echo through the room. Mark's hand froze midair, the carving knife still hovering over the golden-brown turkey. Vanessa's perfectly painted smile faltered, her fork clattering onto the china plate. Her 2 children stared at me with wide, frightened eyes. Their hands paused halfway to their mouths. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the room, but to me it might as well have been smoke and ash. I stood there in the doorway, snow still clinging to my boots, Liam pressed tightly against me. His small body shivered under my coat. His breath was shallow, ragged. My own heartbeat thudded in my ears, too loud, too fast. Mom, Mark stammered, finding his voice at last. What are you doing here? I took a single step forward, my eyes burning into him. Answer me first, I said, my voice cold and measured. Why is my grandson outside freezing in 5-degree weather? Vanessa's lips twitched. He wasn't freezing, she said quickly, her voice brittle, almost rehearsed. He was just cooling off. He'd been misbehaving, throwing a tantrum, and cooling off. I cut her off, my tone sharp enough to slice glass. In asterisk, that asterisk weather, I looked down at Liam. His hands were shaking violently now, tiny fingers clutching at my coat like a lifeline. He's 6 years old, Vanessa. He doesn't need to asterisk cool off asterisk. He needs warmth, food, love. Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked at Mark, pleading silently for help. Mark ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. Mom, please don't make a scene. Let's just talk about this calmly, okay? Calmly. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want me to be asterisk, calm asterisk, when I find your child outside in the snow without a coat, when he can barely stand from the cold. He rubbed his forehead. You don't understand. No, I snapped, my voice rising. What I don't understand is how asterisk, my son asterisk, the boy I raised to be kind, the man who swore to love his family, could allow this. The table was still laden with food. A roasted turkey glistened under the chandelier's light. Bowls of mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce sat untouched now, their steam curling upward. It looked like something out of a magazine, perfect, staged, false. I caught sight of something that made my stomach twist, a small, empty chair pushed against the far wall. It had a child's cushion on it, but no plate, no napkin, no glass, just an empty space. Where's his seat? I demanded, pointing toward it. Mark flinched. He eats later, with the kids. I turned my gaze to the table. Vanessa's children, two neat little dolls in matching sweaters, lowered their eyes, silent. Their plates were piled high with food. Liam's was nowhere to be seen. Later, I said, my voice trembling. He eats later while you sit here pretending to be a happy family. Vanessa tried to smile again, but her voice quivered. You don't understand how difficult it's been. Liam's different. He doesn't listen. He breaks things. He cries all the time. It upsets the other children. We're trying to teach him discipline. Discipline? I spat the word like poison. By locking him out of his own home. Her eyes flashed. You can't come in here and judge how we raise our children. You don't live here. You don't know what it's been like. You're right. I said softly, dangerously, I don't live here. But I do know what love looks like. And this isn't it. I turned to Mark. What happened to you? He looked away. His voice was small, defeated. Things got complicated. Vanessa's been trying to keep the peace, Mom. You know how Liam can be. He has outbursts he reminds me of. He trailed off, but I knew how that sentence ended. He reminds me of her. Liam's mother, my daughter-in-law, gone 6 years now. Taken by illness before her child was old enough to remember her face. Mark had loved her once, deeply. When she died, he'd broken. And when he met Vanessa a year later, he clung to her like a drowning man to driftwood, but somewhere along the way that driftwood turned into a cage. I stared at him, trying to find the son I once knew in that tired, hollow man. She's gone, Mark. I said quietly, but Liam isn't. He's your son your only son. And if you keep treating him like this, you're going to lose him too. Mark's eyes filled with something I couldn't name, shame maybe, or fear. He looked down, jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Silence stretched again. The only sound was the faint hum of the heater and the crackle of the fireplace. Outside, snow began to fall heavier, thick flakes swirling against the windows like ghosts. I moved deeper into the room, still holding Liam. He was starting to warm up, but his little body trembled against me, exhausted. I brushed his hair from his face. Are you hungry, sweetheart? He nodded weakly. I looked at the table, so much food, more than they could ever eat. And fury rose in my chest again. Without asking, I walked over, grabbed a plate, and began to serve him. Turkey. Mashed potatoes, gravy. I didn't care whose plate it had been. I piled it high and brought it to him. Vanessa took a step forward. You can't just watch me, I said. I sat Liam down at the head of the table, Mark's chair. If the gesture shocked them, good. It was meant to. He looked up at me uncertainly. Grandma, am I allowed to eat here? My throat tightened. You don't need anyone's permission to eat at your own table. He hesitated only a moment before picking up the fork. His hands were still shaking, but he began to eat, slowly. At first, then faster, hunger overtaking fear. I turned away so he wouldn't see the tears in my eyes. Vanessa's face had gone stiff with outrage. This is unacceptable. She hissed at Mark. Are you really going to let her come in here and... Mark slammed his hand on the table. The sound made everyone jump. His voice trembled when he spoke. Just stop, Vanessa. Please, for a moment. She looked at him as if she didn't recognize him. He turned to me, his voice breaking. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she left him outside like that. I thought he was in his room. Then you weren't paying attention. I said softly, you weren't looking. Because if you had been, you'd have seen the truth a long time ago. He covered his face with his hands. The man who once stood tall and proud now looked small, broken like the boy he used to be when he scraped his knees and came crying to me for help. But this wasn't a scraped knee. This was a wound he'd made himself. Vanessa stood rigid beside him, her arms crossed, her jaw tight. "You're overreacting. He was outside for 5 minutes at most." "You're making it sound like abuse." I met her eyes, unblinking. 5 minutes in 5° weather can kill a child. The words hung between us, heavy and final. Then softly I added, "But you wouldn't know that, would you? Because your heart's been frozen longer than any winter." Her face turned crimson. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Liam suddenly coughed a dry, hoarse sound that cut through everything. I immediately crouched beside him, rubbing his back. "SHH, it's okay, baby. You're safe now," I whispered. He leaned into me, his small body trembling again. "I didn't mean to make Daddy mad," he said quietly, tears welling in his eyes. "I just wanted to play with the cat." But Miss Vanessa said cats are dirty and made me go outside. My blood ran cold. A cat? He had been trying to feed a stray cat. I looked up at Mark, who looked horrified. "You let her punish him for being kind. He started to say something, but no words came, only silence. That was answer enough. I held Liam close, pressing my cheek against his cold forehead. My decision was made in that moment. Whatever happened next, I was not leaving this house without him. Vanessa muttered something under her breath about calling the police, but I was already pulling out my phone. "Don't bother," I said calmly. "I'll do it for you." Mark's head shot up. "Mom, wait." "No, Mark," I said, my voice breaking but resolute. "This ends tonight." As I dialed, I glanced around the table one last time. The turkey had gone cold, the candles had burned low, and the perfect little family portrait had cracked wide open. Those 6 words, ***, "Why is my grandson outside freezing?" ***, had shattered everything, and I knew, deep in my bones, that nothing about this family would ever be the same again. The world outside was buried in white by the time the police arrived. Snowflakes pressed against the windows like ghosts trying to peer inside, drawn to the warmth and chaos that pulsed through the house. Mark paced the living room, his hands trembling. Vanessa sat rigid on the couch, her lips pressed tight into a line of fury. Liam was curled against me, wrapped in my coat and blanket, sipping warm milk I'd made from the kitchen. The officers moved quietly, writing notes, asking questions. I should have been numb by then, but I wasn't. My heart felt like a stone cracking slowly with every breath. As the questions went on, I found my eyes drifting toward Mark, my son, the same boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard, who used to beg me to stay up late for just one more story. Now he was a man I barely recognize, nervous, hollow, fading into the background while his wife glared daggers at me. It was strange how betrayal never arrived all at once. It was small things. A missed phone call, an ignored birthday, a lie told to make cruelty sound reasonable. It was the slow erasure of love until one day you woke up and realized your family had become strangers. That night, as the officers spoke with Vanessa, I drifted back through the years, piecing together the quiet betrayals that had led us here. I had raised Mark alone after his father died. He was a good boy, kind, sensitive, smart. When he met Claire, his first wife, I'd seen in her the same softness he carried. They built a home filled with laughter, and when Liam was born, I thought the circle was complete. Then Claire got sick. The months that followed were cruel and quick. She slipped away before she could see her son's first day of kindergarten. Mark was shattered. He stopped eating, stopped smiling, barely spoke. I tried to hold him up, but grief is heavy, and sometimes even love isn't strong enough to carry two broken hearts at once. When Vanessa appeared, I was grateful at first. She was confident, put together, everything Mark wasn't. She promised she'd help him move on, and for a while she did. He started shaving again, dressing properly, smiling in pictures, but there was something in her eyes that unsettled me. She looked at Liam the way someone might look at a stain on a white tablecloth, annoyed that it existed, wishing it could be scrubbed away. The first time I noticed it was on Liam's 5th birthday. I had brought him a small cake shaped like a train. Vanessa smiled politely, but when Liam reached for a slice with frosting on his fingers, she snapped, "Use a napkin, Liam. Don't touch things like a baby." Mark laughed it off, but I didn't. The way the boy's face fell stayed with me. That was the beginning. After that, invitations grew rare. Vanessa said Liam was adjusting poorly, that he needed boundaries. When I called, Mark always sounded tired, distracted. Then one day, the calls stopped completely. For 2 years, I didn't see them. I sent gifts, books, clothes, a handmade sweater, but everything came back. Marked asterisk returned to sender. Asterisk at first, I thought they'd moved. Then I realized Vanessa didn't want anything in that house that reminded Mark of the life he'd had before her, and Mark. Oh, my foolish, weak-hearted boy. He let her erase his past piece by piece, as long as she promised him peace. But peace built on silence is a fragile thing. It always shatters when the truth speaks. "Ma'am," one of the officers said gently, pulling me from my thoughts, "we've documented the situation. Given the weather and the boy's condition, we'll be recommending a welfare check and a temporary stay with next of kin." I nodded, barely breathing. "He's coming with me tonight." Vanessa shot up from the couch. "You can't just take him." The officer turned calmly toward her. "Ma'am, the child was found outside in freezing weather. Until we can complete our report, it's safer if he stays with his grandmother." Mark's shoulders slumped. He didn't protest. Vanessa rounded on him, her voice rising. "Are you seriously going to let her take him after everything I've done for this family?" Mark's eyes were glassy, unfocused. "Vanessa, I think it's best if what?" She spat. "If you let her ruin our life. That little brat has been nothing but trouble since the day I married you. He cries, he lies, he breaks things. He doesn't belong here." The words hung in the air like venom. I rose slowly, my arms tightening around Liam. He looked up at me, terrified, as if expecting me to yell back. But I didn't yell. I looked at Vanessa, this woman who had stolen my son's love and turned it into something hollow, and said quietly, "You're right. He doesn't belong asterisk here, asterisk not in a house without kindness." For a moment her mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer to that. The officers guided her aside to finish their report. I turned. "Mark," he wouldn't look at me. "Mark," I said softly, "do you remember when you were 9? You broke your father's watch, and you hid it because you thought he'd be angry?" He frowned, confused. "Mom, what? I found you crying in the garage," I went on, "and when I asked why, you said, 'I didn't mean to, but it's broken forever now.' Do you remember what your father said when he fixed it?" Mark's voice was barely a whisper. He said, "Some things can be mended if you're brave enough to admit you broke them." I nodded, tears filling my eyes. "That's right. So tell me, son, are you brave enough to admit what you've done to this family?" His face crumpled. For the first time that night, real tears filled his eyes. He reached for me, but I stepped back. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know how bad it had gotten. Vanessa said it was normal, that it was for his own good. I thought you thought wrong." I said, my voice trembling. "You thought peace was worth your son's pain. You thought love could survive silence. But you were wrong, Mark. Love dies when we stop protecting it." He covered his face and sobbed. I wanted to hold him. God, I wanted to pull him close the way I used to when nightmares woke him as a boy. But I couldn't. Part of me that was his mother was shattered by the woman who raised him, and the man he'd chosen to become. I turned away. "Let's go home, Liam." The boy looked at me uncertain. Am I in trouble? I knelt in front of him, brushing the hair from his forehead. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, "you're not in trouble. You're going home." He smiled faintly, the first real smile I'd seen from him all night. The officers escorted us to the car. Snow was falling heavier now, blanketing the driveway, muffling the world in quiet. I opened the passenger door and tucked Liam in, wrapping the blanket tighter around him. As I started the car, Mark appeared in the doorway. He didn't say anything, just stood there, watching as the headlights cut through the snow. For a moment, I almost pitied him. The man who'd betrayed his son, not out of malice, but cowardice. But pity wouldn't save Liam, so I drove away. That night, when we reached my house, I made Liam hot chocolate and put him in my old guest room, the one with the blue curtains and shelves full of children's books. He fell asleep almost immediately. His little hand clutching the teddy bear I'd given him years ago. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching him breathe, listening to the quiet hum of safety settle over the house. Then, when stillness grew too loud, I sat in the living room and cried. Not just for Liam, but for the boy I'd lost long before tonight. The one who'd grown up to be a man who forgot what love was supposed to look like. It was a strange kind of grief, the kind that doesn't bury you, but burns slowly, leaving ashes where faith used to be. But as I wiped my tears and looked toward the room where Liam slept, I made myself a promise this would not be the end of our story. I would fight for him with every breath, every ounce of strength left in my body, and someday Mark would have to face what he'd done. Because betrayal, no matter how carefully hidden, always comes home in the end. The following weeks blurred together in a haze of paperwork, interviews, and sleepless nights. Child Protective Services came and went. So did the police. Every time I told the story how I'd found Liam outside, how he trembled like a leaf while his father and stepmother feasted, I felt the same mix of fury and heartbreak rise in my throat. But through it all, Liam smiled more. Slowly, day by day, he began to heal. At first, he flinched whenever someone raised their voice. He'd apologize for things that weren't his fault, for spilling milk, for dropping a toy, for laughing too loud. Each "I'm sorry" felt like a knife twist. It would take months before he learned that love didn't come with conditions. My home became his refuge. The walls that had once echoed with silence now held the sound of laughter and piano keys and bedtime stories. He filled the space his grandfather had left behind without even realizing it. It was healing for both of us. And yet, beneath that fragile peace, a storm brewed. Because while I was teaching Liam how to be a child again, I was also quietly preparing for war. It began with a letter, one I sent to the county court demanding custody. Not temporary guardianship, but full legal custody of Liam. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Mark was still his father. And Vanessa, ever the master of manipulation, had already started painting me as an unstable old woman. She called my home *unsafe. She called me *vindictive. She even claimed I had kidnapped Liam. But evidence doesn't lie. The police report, the doctor's notes, the photographs of a 6-year-old child with frostbitten fingers. They all told the story clearly enough, so I waited. And while I waited, I planned. You see, revenge is a quiet thing when done right. It's not about shouting or slamming doors. It's about truth. The kind that doesn't need to scream because it's undeniable when spoken aloud. The day of the hearing came in early January. Snow fell again, as if the world itself remembered that night. I arrived in my best coat, holding Liam's small hand. He wore the sweater I'd knitted him for Christmas. His other hand held a drawing, a simple one, of 2 stick figures standing under a house labeled home. Vanessa was already there when we arrived. She looked perfect. Of course, her blonde hair curled, her makeup flawless, a pearl necklace resting against her throat like armor. Mark sat beside her, pale and weary, his hands clasped tight together. When he saw us, he looked away. The judge, a kind-faced woman with silver hair, eyed through the reports silently before looking up. "This is a difficult case," she said, her tone measured. "Family wounds often are." Vanessa leaned forward, voice syrupy, sweet. "Your Honor, I love Liam, I do, but Eleanor, she's elderly, she's not capable of caring for a young child long term. I've tried to provide a stable home, but Liam's behavior has been difficult." Behavior? I interrupted before I could stop myself. My voice came out steady, but my hands were shaking. "You mean the behavior of a child desperate for love." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "You don't know what goes on in our home." "Oh, I know exactly what goes on," I said softly. "I know about the empty chair at your table. I know about the bruises you call accidents. I know about the frostbite on his fingers from the night you left him outside to cool off." The courtroom fell silent. The judge's gaze hardened. "Mrs. Whittaker," she said, turning to Vanessa, "is that true?" Vanessa opened her mouth, but the words faltered. It wasn't like that. "He was outside for only 5 minutes. I cut in. because the doctor said he was minutes away from hypothermia. So tell me, how many minutes does it take to freeze a child's heart? Her cheeks flushed crimson. You're twisting this. You've always hated me. No, I said quietly. I only hate what you've done. I looked at Mark then. My voice softened, and I hate that my son let you do it. He lifted his head, eyes glassy. Mom, please, do you remember what you told me when Liam was born? I asked. You said, I'll protect him with my life. That was before you decided silence was easier than love. Tears spilled down his cheeks. He didn't answer. The judge cleared her throat. That's enough. I've heard what I need to hear. The gavel came down softly, but the sound was thunder to me. Custody of the minor, Liam Whittaker, is hereby granted to his paternal grandmother, Eleanor Whittaker. Visitation rights for the father will be contingent upon completion of parental counseling and court review. It was over. Just like that, the world shifted. Vanessa stood frozen, disbelief twisting her features. Mark buried his face in his hands, and I, after years of helplessness, finally exhaled. I had won, not out of vengeance alone, but out of love, because sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply making sure kindness wins. Life afterward wasn't perfect. Healing never is. Mark called a few times over the following months, trying to apologize. The first few times, I let it go to voicemail. Then one afternoon, I picked up. His voice was small. How's he doing? Better, I said. He smiles now. He sleeps through the night. He was silent for a long moment. I don't expect you to forgive me. I already have, I said softly. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It only gives you a chance to be better. He didn't come to see us right away. Maybe he was too ashamed, or maybe he finally realized what it meant to take responsibility. But I hoped one day, when he was ready, he'd come, not as a broken man, but as the father Liam deserved. As for Vanessa, she disappeared from our lives completely. Word reached me later that she'd been charged with credit card fraud and embezzlement at her old job. It seemed she had always been taking more than what was hers. That, I supposed, was karma's own quiet revenge. The next Thanksgiving came faster than I expected. This time the house was alive with warmth. The smell of turkey filled the air, mingled with cinnamon, apple pie, and laughter. Liam sat at the table beside me, his hair a little longer, his eyes brighter. He'd helped me set the table this year, meticulously placing each fork and spoon just so, proud of his grown-up job. We ate until our stomachs ached, and afterward he climbed onto my lap. With a smile, Grandma, he said sleepily. Yes, love. Do you think Daddy will come next year? I kissed the top of his head, maybe. People can change if they really want to. He thought for a moment. Then I hope he does. I'll save him some pie. I smiled through the sudden sting of tears. That's my boy. The fire crackled softly in the hearth. Outside, snow drifted down again, quiet and gentle. I looked at Liam. His eyes half closed, his small hand curled around mine, and I realized something profound. Those 6 words, asterisk, asterisk, why is my grandson outside freezing? Asterisk, asterisk, had been more than anger. They had been a prayer. A line in the sand, the moment love found its voice again. And though I would never forget the pain that led us here, I would always remember that from that pain came redemption, a reminder that even after betrayal, warmth could still return to a frozen heart. I looked toward the window, at the white world beyond, and whispered, thank you. Not to anyone in particular, just to life, for giving me another chance to be what love was supposed to look like. Liam stirred against me. What are you thankful for, Grandma? I smiled. For second chances, sweetheart. He yawned. And for pie? I laughed softly. And for pie. Outside, the snow fell in steady, silver sheets, erasing footprints, softening edges. Inside, laughter filled every corner of the home that had once been empty. And as the clock ticked past midnight, I thought of those 6 words one last time, and how, in saving one boy from the cold, they had warmed 2 souls forever.